I didn't volunteer. That's the first thing people get wrong. Nobody volunteers to crawl into a hole that might already be waiting for you. It was 1968, outside a small village west of Saigon. The maps called it a nothing place, no name anyone back home would remember. Banana trees, red dirt, huts that looked abandoned, until you noticed how clean the paths were. Clean paths meant traffic. Traffic meant tunnels. The platoon stopped moving without anyone saying it out loud. You learn to feel that pause. Rifles dip. Talking dies. Someone spits. The jungle keeps breathing like nothing's wrong. That's when the lieutenant looked down the line, not at the biggest guy, not at the loud one, at me. 5'6", narrow shoulders, the kind of build people back home called lean. Over here, that meant useful. He didn't say my name. He didn't have to. Tunnel rat. That was it. Just one word. Like it explained everything. The hole was small. Smaller than it looked from a distance. Just a dark mouth in the dirt, hidden under leaves and a piece of broken pottery someone had set there on purpose. The Viet Cong were careful. They didn't rush things. They didn't waste traps. They let time do the work. I knelt beside the opening and felt heat rolling out of it like breath. Not fresh heat, old heat, trapped heat that had nowhere to go. Someone handed me my gear, a .45 pistol, a flashlight with tape wrapped around it so it wouldn't shine too bright. A knife I pretended not to notice. No radio. Radios echoed in tunnels. Got you killed. Someone slapped my helmet. See you in a minute. Nobody meant it as a joke. Before you go down, you think about air. You don't think about your family. You don't think about medals or orders. You think about how much space there is between breaths. I lay on my stomach and slid feet first, then turned around once I was inside. The dirt scraped my ribs. My pack snagged, and I had to wriggle like an animal to get free. Then the light above me vanished, and the tunnel became the whole world. Down there, sound changes. Your breathing sounds too loud. Your heartbeat sounds like footsteps. I moved inch by inch, checking with my fingers before my knees before my elbows. The tunnel walls were smooth from years of hands and bodies. This wasn't some quick hole dug yesterday. This was a system. The smell hit next. Damp earth, sweat, smoke that never fully left. Something else too. Fear that had soaked in so long it was part of the dirt. I turned my flashlight on just enough to see shapes. The beam felt like a risk every time I used it. Light meant sight. Sight meant being seen. 10 feet in, I found the first trap. A tripwire tied to a grenade, tucked low against the wall where your knee would brush it. Whoever set it knew exactly how Americans crawled. I cut the wire slow. My hands shook so bad I had to stop and breathe through my teeth. That's when it hit me. Up top, you fight together. Down here, you die alone. The tunnel bent left. That's when I heard breathing. Not echoes, not rats. Breathing that stopped when I stopped. I shut off my light. Darkness presses in on you down there. It's not empty. It's heavy. Like the tunnel is leaning closer, listening too. I waited. Seconds stretch in tunnels. A minute feels like an hour. Your mind fills the dark with things that aren't there, until something moves and proves one of them is real. I heard a foot scrape, very close. I didn't shout. You don't shout down there. I raised the pistol and turned the light on at the same time. The chamber opened up just ahead. Low ceiling, packed dirt floor, a cooking pot pushed into a niche in the wall, rice sacks, a place someone had slept. And a man, barefoot, black pajamas, rifle halfway up. We both froze. He looked just as scared as I felt. Then everything happened at once. The gunshots were deafening, the tunnel filled with dust and fire. My ears rang so hard I thought I'd gone deaf. I fired until the pistol clicked empty, then crawled backward on instinct, smashing my elbow into the wall, tearing skin. Something sharp cut my arm. I didn't feel it yet. I didn't know if he was hit. I didn't want to know. All I knew was that the tunnel suddenly felt too small to hold either of us. I crawled back the way I came, faster now, panic winning over training. My flashlight bounced uselessly. My shoulder slammed into dirt. My breath came out in ragged gasps. When hands grabbed me and pulled me into daylight, I didn't fight them. I just lay there, staring at the sky like it might disappear again. Someone asked, "What'd you see?" I told them enough. They blew the tunnel after that. The ground shook. Dirt collapsed inward. Smoke rolled out of holes I hadn't even noticed. Whatever was still down there, alive or dead, stayed there. That night, I cleaned my pistol over and over. My arm was wrapped in a bandage. I hadn't noticed the blood until someone pointed it out. I kept expecting dirt to fall from the ceiling. Sleep didn't come. When I closed my eyes, the tunnel was still there. Still dark. Still breathing. And that was the night I understood something they never put in reports. The tunnels didn't make you brave. They made you understand how small a man really is when the earth decides to close around him. After that first tunnel, they didn't ask any more. They just nodded in my direction. Every patrol after that, when the point man stopped and the jungle went quiet, I felt it coming before anyone spoke. A shallow depression in the dirt, a patch of ground that didn't look right, ants moving where ants shouldn't be. Someone would kneel, brush away leaves. Another hole, another breath of heat. I became the guy who went down. You don't get used to tunnels. That's a lie people tell because it sounds tough. What you get used to is the anticipation. The waiting while everyone watches you check your gear. The way voices get softer, like the jungle itself is listening. The knowledge that whatever happens next is happening to you first, and maybe only to you. Every tunnel had its own personality. Some were tight enough that you had to turn your head sideways to breathe. Others widened suddenly, like they wanted to trick you into relaxing. Some were dry and dusty. Others flooded up to your chest, water cold and unmoving, hiding everything your hands couldn't reach. And some were lived in. The worst tunnels weren't the ones with traps. The worst ones were the quiet ones. You'd crawl for minutes and see signs of life everywhere. Footprints smoothed into the dirt, cooking marks, empty cigarette wrappers, but no one there. That meant they had heard you. That meant they were waiting. I learned to stop often, turn off the light, just listen. Sometimes you'd hear coughing deep in the dark, sometimes whispers, sometimes nothing at all, which was worse. Nothing meant patience. Once I found a schoolroom underground. Low benches carved into the dirt, a chalkboard with writing still on it, lessons half finished. I remember staring at it longer than I should have, thinking about kids sitting there while bombs fell overhead. That tunnel had no traps, no fighters, just proof that the war wasn't just happening on the surface. When I came out, the lieutenant asked if we should destroy it. I nodded. I didn't trust it to stay empty. You start to feel different after a while. Above ground, I laughed less, spoke less. The other guys noticed it before I did. Someone said I moved like I was still underground. Slow, careful, always checking corners. They weren't wrong. Loud noises made me flinch. Sudden darkness made my chest tighten. I started sleeping with my boots on, just in case. The tunnels didn't end when I climbed out. They followed me. One afternoon, we hit a tunnel complex bigger than anything I'd seen. Multiple entrances, ventilation shafts disguised as termite mounds, fake holes that led nowhere, meant to waste time while the real entrances stayed hidden. The lieutenant looked at me longer than usual. "You good?" I wanted to say no. I said yes. This one went deep. deep enough that the air felt stale, like it had been breathed too many times. I moved past junctions that split off in different directions, each one a choice that could be wrong. Left could mean storage. Right could mean a trap. Straight ahead could mean someone holding a pistol just like mine. I chose straight. That's where I heard voices. More than one. I turned off the light and pressed myself against the wall. The voices were calm, conversational. They weren't whispering. That meant they felt safe. That meant they didn't know I was there. My hands shook so badly I had to wedge the pistol against the dirt to steady it. Sweat ran into my eyes, and I didn't wipe it away. I thought about backing out. Then I thought about what would happen if I didn't warn the platoon. And I stayed. I waited until the voices moved farther away, then crawled backward, inch by inch, praying my knees wouldn't scrape, praying my breath wouldn't give me away. When I reached daylight, I didn't speak at first. I just shook my head and pointed. That was enough. They collapsed the complex with charges and fire. The ground sank in on itself, like it had finally gotten tired of holding secrets. That night, I sat alone and tried to eat. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. I realized then that the tunnels weren't just fighting my body. They were wearing down the space inside me where calm used to live. And I didn't know how much of that space I had left. The next morning, we moved again. The jungle looked the same as always. Green, alive, quiet. And somewhere beneath it, more tunnels were waiting. By the third week, my hands stopped shaking. That scared me more than when they did. It meant something had changed. We were operating closer to Cu Chi now, where the tunnels weren't just hiding places, they were cities. Layers on top of layers. Living quarters below fighting positions. Hospitals beneath kitchens. Escape routes that ran for miles and surfaced behind villages we'd already cleared. You could destroy one entrance and never touch the rest. The earth had learned how to defend itself. Before every tunnel, I did the same things. Checked the flashlight, tapped the pistol. Loosened my helmet strap so I could ditch it if it got stuck. Little rituals. Superstitions, really. You start believing the wrong thing will happen if you don't do them in the same order. The guys would go quiet behind me. Nobody joked anymore. I think they knew. If something went wrong down there wouldn't be screaming. There wouldn't be heroics. There would just be nothing. One tunnel collapsed behind me once. Not all the way, just enough. I felt the air shift before I heard it. Dirt poured in, sealing the passage I'd just crawled through. My flashlight beam hit nothing but packed soil where my way out had been seconds earlier. I didn't move. Panic wastes air. I lay there, face in the dirt, counting breaths and telling myself there was another exit. There always was. Eventually, I found it. A narrow shaft hidden behind a mat of woven grass. I clawed my way up and came out 50 yards from where I'd gone in. Nobody had known I was trapped. That was the worst part. After that, I stopped thinking about medals. Stopped thinking about home. I started thinking in terms of space. How much space to turn my head. How much space to breathe. How much space there was between me and whatever was waiting in the dark. I noticed my thoughts getting smaller, more focused, like the tunnels were teaching me how to think like them. Narrow, efficient, unforgiving. The Viet Cong I encountered down there weren't monsters. That made it harder. Sometimes they were younger than me, sometimes older, sometimes just as scared. I saw fear in their eyes more than once, mirrored back at me in the beam of my flashlight. There was no shouting, no speeches. Just two men meeting in the dark, each one trying to survive another minute. I don't remember faces anymore. I remember moments. Above ground, the war kept going like it always did. Helicopters thumped overhead. Artillery boomed in the distance. Someone always found a way to laugh at something stupid. But every time I went back down, it felt like stepping out of the war everyone else knew and into a quieter, older one. a war measured in inches. One night, a new replacement asked me what it was like. I tried to explain. Told him it wasn't about being tough, that bravery didn't matter much in a place where you couldn't stand up or run. He nodded like he understood. He didn't. I hoped he never would. I started having dreams. Not nightmares, those came later. Just dreams where I was crawling and crawling, and the tunnel never ended. No traps, no enemies, just earth. I'd wake up with my hands clenched, nails digging into my palms. I stopped telling anyone about it. Near the end of my tour, the lieutenant asked if I wanted to rotate out of tunnel work. I told him no. I don't know why. Maybe because it had become my job. Maybe because I trusted myself down there more than anyone else. Maybe because I didn't know who I was without it anymore. The tunnels had taken something from me, but they'd also given me a strange kind of purpose, and letting that go felt like stepping into open ground without cover. The last tunnel I went into was shallow, almost disappointing. A dead end, no traps, no signs of life. When I came out, the jungle felt too bright, too loud, too wide. I stood there longer than I needed to, blinking in the sunlight, feeling like I'd left something behind, or that something had followed me out. When my tour ended, I flew home like everyone else. Dirt washed off, uniform folded away, papers stamped and signed. But the tunnels didn't stay in Vietnam. They came with me. In the way I moved through rooms, in the way I listened for silence, in the way small spaces still made my chest tighten. The war ended. The tunnels didn't. And sometimes, late at night, I still think about that first hole under the banana trees, and how quiet the world was before I went down. I didn't feel anything when the plane touched down. No relief, no pride, just a strange sense that the ground was too solid, like it might give way if I trusted it. People talk about the noise when you get home, the crowds, the shouting, the questions. What I remember most is the space. So much space. The airport ceiling felt impossibly high. Hallways stretched too far. Doors were wide enough that you didn't have to think before walking through them. That should have felt good. It didn't. At home, my mother hugged me like she was afraid I'd disappear again. My father shook my hand first, then pulled me in close without saying a word. Friends asked the same questions everyone asks. Was it bad? Did you see a lot? Are you okay? I told them I was fine. That's what you say when you don't know how to explain something that happened in the dark. The first night in my own bed, I couldn't sleep. The room was quiet, too quiet. No jungle sounds, no distant artillery, just the hum of the house settling. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, waiting for something to happen. Nothing did. That was worse. In Vietnam, silence always meant something was coming. Here, it meant nothing at all. I didn't know what to do with that. Small things started to set me off. Basements, closets, crowded buses. Once, in a grocery store, someone brushed past me in a narrow aisle, and I froze. My chest locked up like I was back underground. I stood there gripping a can of beans until my knuckles went white. No one noticed. That was the strangest part. Above ground, nobody can tell you're stuck. I tried working construction for a while. Outside, open air, sunlight. It helped, until I had to crawl under a house to fix a pipe. The moment my shoulders scraped wood, my breath vanished. I was back in the tunnel, flashlight shaking, air tasting wrong. I backed out so fast, I scraped my arms bloody. I didn't take jobs like that again. People talk about combat like it's about adrenaline. They're wrong. For me, it was about control. In the tunnels, control was everything. Where you put your hand, how fast you breathed, when you moved, when you stopped. Back home, there was too much of everything. Too much noise, too many people, too many places where something could happen but didn't. I missed knowing exactly where the danger was. I didn't talk about Vietnam much. When people found out I'd been a tunnel rat, they'd look at me differently, like I was either braver than them or broken in some interesting way. I was neither. I was just someone who learned how close dirt can get to your face without killing you. Years passed. I married, worked steady jobs, learned how to sit in rooms without checking corners. Most days were fine, but every now and then something would bring it back. A crawl space, a power outage, the smell of damp earth after rain. I'd feel my body tense before my mind caught up. The tunnel never needed permission. I once met another tunnel rat at a veterans gathering. We didn't say much to each other, didn't need to. At one point, someone joked about rats being fearless. The other guy snorted and said, "No such thing." I nodded. Fear was the job. People ask now if I regret it, going down, doing that work. I don't know how to answer. Those tunnels took something from me, something I never got back. But they also taught me something I carry every day. That life is narrow, that air is precious, that silence isn't empty. It's full of everything you don't see. Sometimes, when I can't sleep, I think about that first tunnel again. The heat, the smell, the moment the light disappeared. And I remember how quiet the world was before I went down. Then I take a deep breath. Because now, at least, I can. I learned over time that memories don't come back in order. They don't arrive like a story with a beginning and an end. They come as fragments, a smell, a sound, a feeling that shows up before you understand why. For me, it was always the earth. Years after the war, I was helping a neighbor plant a tree. We dug the hole together, talking about nothing important. The shovel cut into damp soil, dark and heavy. The smell rose up, warm and familiar. Too familiar. I froze with my hands on the handle. For a moment, I wasn't in a backyard. I was on my stomach again, ribs scraping dirt, listening for breathing that wasn't mine. My heart started pounding the same way it used to, hard and fast, like it was trying to escape my chest. The neighbor asked if I was okay. I nodded. That's what you do. I never told my kids about the tunnels when they were young. I told them I'd been in Vietnam. That was enough. They didn't ask many questions. Kids sense when something is heavy. When they got older, they asked more. "What did you do, Dad?" I said, "I went where I fit." They laughed, thinking it was a joke. I didn't correct them. There's a strange thing about being a tunnel rat. People imagine courage. They imagine fearlessness. What they don't imagine is waiting. Waiting in the dark. Waiting for your breathing to slow down. Waiting to hear something move. Most of the time, nothing happened. And that was what wore you down. Because every quiet second made you wonder if the next one would be different. I sometimes think about the men on the other side of those tunnels, the ones who lived down there. They knew the tunnels better than I ever did. They knew which turns led to air, which chambers flooded in the rain, which walls were thin enough to listen through. We were enemies. But in the dark, that felt less important than the fact that we were both human beings, trying to survive in a place that didn't want us there. I wonder if any of them still think about it too. As the years passed, the war faded into books, documentaries, anniversaries. People started talking about it like it was settled. It never felt settled to me. Not because of politics, not because of who won, but because there were parts of it, entire underground worlds, that most people would never see or understand. Worlds where bravery didn't look like charging forward. It looked like stopping, listening, breathing slowly enough to stay alive. I went back to Vietnam once, not to Cu Chi, not to any of the places that mattered to me back then, just as a tourist. The country was different, louder, faster, alive in ways it hadn't been during the war. Kids rode bicycles where patrols once moved. Markets stood where craters had been. At one point, I saw a small hole near a field, probably just an animal burrow. My chest tightened anyway. Some habits don't unlearn. People sometimes say, "At least you made it home." They mean well, and they're right. But home isn't a switch you flip. It's something you rebuild slowly, piece by piece, in the open air, while part of you still remembers how it felt when the light went out. I don't dream about tunnels as much anymore. When I do, they're quieter than they used to be. No gunfire, no shouting. Just earth and breath, and the slow understanding that you can't stay down there forever. Eventually, you have to crawl back out. I tell this story now because silence is its own kind of tunnel, and stories are air. If no one talks about what went on beneath the jungle, what it cost, what it changed, then it all stays buried. And buried things have a way of coming back, wrong. Sometimes, when the house is quiet and the night stretches out, I sit and listen. Not for danger, just for proof that I'm still here, above ground, breathing, and grateful for every inch of space between me and the dirt. There are days now when I don't think about the tunnels at all. Those days surprise me. They arrive quietly, an afternoon spent fixing something around the house, a long walk where my mind drifts without warning me first. I'll realize hours have passed without once measuring the width of a doorway or listening for sounds that don't belong. On those days, the world feels wide again. I didn't think that would ever happen. I used to believe the tunnels took something permanent, that once you learned how close the earth could get, you never really forgot. That's partly true. But time does something strange. It doesn't erase. It softens. It rounds the sharpest edges until they don't cut every time you brush against them. The memories don't disappear. They just stop demanding your attention. I learned to breathe differently. That sounds simple, but it isn't. In the tunnels, breathing was a calculation. Too fast, and you panicked. Too slow, and you passed out. Every breath mattered. For years after the war, I still breathed like that. Short, careful pulls of air, like it might run out if I wasn't paying attention. One day, sitting on a porch watching rain fall, I noticed my chest rise all the way up. Full breath. No fear. It caught me off guard. People don't talk much about tunnel rats anymore. Sometimes we're a footnote. Sometimes a curiosity. Sometimes a story told a little too lightly. That's fine. Not everything needs to be remembered loudly. Some things are meant to be remembered accurately, quietly. What I want people to understand isn't how dangerous it was, though it was. It's how small the war could feel. Not maps or arrows or speeches. Just a man, a flashlight, and a few feet of dirt between life and whatever came next. That kind of war doesn't make heroes. It makes survivors. I think about the lieutenant sometimes, the way he never said my name before sending me down. Not because he didn't know it, but because using it might have made it harder. I think about the guys who waited above ground, listening for sounds they couldn't hear, knowing that if something went wrong, there was nothing they could do. That kind of trust stays with you. If there's a lesson in all of this, it isn't about bravery or toughness. It's about limits. How close a person can come to them and still keep going. How important it is to know when to stop. How easily we forget the cost once the dirt settles back into place. I don't crawl into small spaces anymore. I don't need to prove anything. When I walk into a room now, I let my shoulders relax. I don't check the ceiling. I don't count exits. I remind myself that I'm allowed to stand. Sometimes people thank me for my service. I nod. I appreciate it. But what I'm most grateful for isn't the thanks. It's the air. The kind you don't have to think about. The kind that fills your lungs without asking permission. The kind that reminds you you're not underground anymore. I tell this story so it doesn't disappear, so the tunnels don't collapse inward and vanish from memory the way they did in the jungle. Because forgetting makes things smaller than they were. And this was never small. The world is quiet tonight. Not the dangerous kind. Just quiet. And for the first time in a long time, that's enough.
Before you leave this story, take a moment. The war didn't just happen on battlefields or in history books. It happened in the dark, inches from another human being, where fear had no audience and survival had no witnesses. Stories like this disappear easily, not because they aren't important, but because the people who lived them learned how to stay quiet. When these memories fade, the cost of war fades with them. And when the cost is forgotten, the same mistakes find their way back. That's why these diary-style war stories matter. They keep the human truth alive, so history isn't just remembered, but understood. If this story moved you, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. Your voice helps keep these memories above ground. Thank you for listening, and may we never forget what war truly takes.